There's a man who wakes up every morning and looks in the mirror, but he doesn't see himself. He sees his neighbor's new car, his colleague's promotion, his brother's perfect family. He brushes his teeth while mentally calculating how much money everyone else is making. He gets dressed thinking about how everyone else seems to have it all figured out. By the time he leaves his house, he's already defeated by life that aren't even his own. Sound familiar? Of course it does, because we've all been that man. We've all been that woman. We've all stood at the crossroads where we had to choose between focusing on our own path or getting lost in the maze of everyone else's journey. And here's the brutal truth nobody wants to hear. The reason most people never win is because they never focus on themselves long enough to even know what winning means for them. You see, there's something fascinating about human nature. We can spot a flaw in someone else's plan from a mile away, but we can't see the masterpiece that's waiting to be created in our own lives. We become experts at everyone else's business while remaining strangers to our own potential. We know exactly what our friends should do with their marriages, their careers, their money, but we can't figure out why we feel empty when we wake up each morning. Why does this happen? Why do we become tourists in everyone else's life while remaining foreigners in our own? It's because focusing on yourself is the hardest thing you'll ever do. It requires you to face the person in the mirror without any distractions, without any excuses, without any blame, to shift on to others. It demands that you take full responsibility for where you are and where you're going. When you focus on others, you get to play the victim. When you focus on yourself, you become the author of your own story. And let me tell you something about being an author. It's terrifying, because once you pick up that pen, you can't blame anyone else for what gets written on those pages. There was a farmer who spent his entire spring watching his neighbor's field, convinced that the grass was greener, the soil more fertile, the crops more promising. He became so obsessed with studying his neighbor's methods that he forgot to tend to his own land. Come harvest time, his neighbor had abundant crops, while the obsessed farmer had nothing but weeds and regret. The tragedy wasn't that he failed to grow anything. The tragedy was that his land was actually more fertile than his neighbor's. He just never gave it the attention it deserved. This is the story of most people's lives. They have fertile ground, talents, opportunities, dreams, capabilities, but they're too busy staring over the fence to cultivate their own garden. They know more about their favorite actor's love life than they do about their own goals. They can recite statistics about sports teams, but can't tell you what they accomplished last month toward their dreams. But here's what happens when you finally decide to focus on you. At first it feels selfish. Society has conditioned us to believe that paying attention to ourselves is somehow wrong, that we should always be looking outward, always comparing, always measuring ourselves against others. We've been taught that humility means making ourselves small, that confidence means arrogance, that self-focus means selfishness. But there's a difference between being selfish and being self-centered. Selfish people take from others. Self-centered people develop themselves so they have more to give. Selfish people drain energy from rooms. Selfish people fill rooms with possibility. Selfish people see the world as a pie with limited slices. Self-centered people understand that success isn't a zero-sum game. When you focus on you, something magical begins to happen. You start to notice things about yourself that you never saw before. You discover strengths you didn't know existed. You uncover talents that have been buried under years of comparison and self-doubt. You begin to understand your own rhythm, your own pace, your own unique way of moving through the world. Think about a river for a moment. A river doesn't compare itself to other rivers. It doesn't worry about whether the river in the next valley is flowing faster or has clearer water. A river simply follows its own path, carving its own channel, creating its own landscape. And in doing so, it becomes exactly what it was meant to be: powerful, purposeful, and irreplaceable. You have your own channel to carve. You have your own landscape to create. But you can't do that while you're busy studying someone else's map. But let's get real for a moment. When I say focus on you until you win, I don't mean stare at yourself in the mirror all day admiring your reflection. I don't mean become so self-absorbed that you ignore the world around you. I mean something far more profound and far more challenging. I mean falling in love with the process of becoming who you're meant to be. You see, most people are in love with the idea of success, but they're not in love with the process of growing. They want the harvest, but they don't want to plant seeds. They want the applause, but they don't want to practice. They want the destination, but they refuse to walk the path. And that's exactly why they never win. Because winning isn't an event, it's a way of being. There's a story about a master craftsman who spent 30 years perfecting his art. Every day, while his peers were gossiping about the latest trends in their field, he was in his workshop, alone with his tools and his vision. People called him antisocial. They said he was wasting his time. They mocked his dedication to what seemed like an obsession. But here's what they didn't understand. He wasn't avoiding people. He was becoming someone worth meeting. He wasn't wasting time. He was investing in eternity. And when he finally emerged from those 30 years of focused work, his creations were so extraordinary that people traveled from distant lands just to witness his mastery. Now, you might be thinking, 30 years? I don't have 30 years. But you're missing the point. The magic wasn't in the 30 years. The magic was in the decision he made every single day for 30 years to focus on his craft instead of the crowd, to focus on his growth instead of the gossip, to focus on his development instead of the distractions. Every morning you wake up with the same choice. You can spend your energy studying what everyone else is doing, or you can spend it becoming who you're meant to be. You can spend your time keeping score of other people's games, or you can spend it playing your own game at the highest level possible. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think focusing on yourself means cutting yourself off from the world. They think it means becoming a hermit, avoiding all social interaction, rejecting help from others. That's not focus, that's fear. That's not self-development, that's self-isolation. Real focus means being so clear about your own path that you can walk it confidently while still being present for others. It means being so secure in your own journey that you can celebrate others' victories without feeling diminished. It means being so committed to your own growth that you can learn from everyone you meet without losing your own identity. When you truly focus on yourself, you become magnetic. Not because you're trying to attract attention, but because you're living authentically. There's something irresistible about a person who knows who they are and where they're going. There's something compelling about someone who's more interested in their own improvement than in your approval. Think about the people who have influenced you most in your life. Were they the ones who were constantly seeking validation, constantly comparing themselves to others, constantly worried about what everyone else was thinking? Or were they the ones who seemed to march to their own drum, who had an inner compass that guided them regardless of external circumstances, who were so focused on their own mission that they inspired you to find yours? You know the answer. And deep down you know that you have that same magnetic quality inside you, waiting to be unleashed. But it can only emerge when you stop performing for others and start becoming for yourself. Here's a question that will change everything if you're honest with your answer. What would you do if you knew for certain that nobody was watching? What dreams would you pursue? What risks would you take? What person would you become? Because here's the secret that successful people understand. The person you are when nobody's watching is the person who determines whether you win or lose. Most people are performers. They're always on stage, always playing to an audience, always adjusting their behavior based on who's watching. But winners are practitioners. They're the same person in private as they are in public. They do the work when nobody's cheering. They maintain their standards when nobody's checking. They pursue excellence when nobody's rewarding them for it. And this is where the transformation begins. Not in the big moments when the spotlight is on you, but in the small moments when the only witness is your own conscience. Not in the decisions that everyone will hear about, but in the choices that only you will know you made. The moment you decide to focus on yourself, the world will conspire to distract you. Suddenly, everyone will have an opinion about what you should be doing. Friends will question your priorities. Family members will worry that you're changing. And they're right, you are changing. And that terrifies them, because your transformation holds up a mirror to their own stagnation. But here's what you need to understand about this resistance. It's not really about you, it's about them. When people criticize your commitment to self-improvement, they're really expressing their own frustration with their lack of commitment. When they try to pull you back into old patterns, they're really afraid of being left behind. There was once a young eagle who was raised among chickens. For years he pecked at the ground and believed that his highest aspiration was to reach the top of the chicken coop. One day an old eagle called down to him, "Why are you walking when you were born to soar?" The moment he spread his wings and took flight, the chickens below clucked in distress. "Come back, it's dangerous up there." You're abandoning us. But the young eagle had tasted the freedom of flight, and he could never go back to pecking at the ground. You are that eagle. The moment you decide to soar, the chickens in your life will try to convince you to come back down. They'll use guilt, fear, and even love to keep you grounded. They'll tell you that your dreams are unrealistic, that your focus on yourself is hurting your relationships. But here's the truth. Your transformation doesn't diminish them. Your success doesn't reduce their possibilities. The more you become who you're meant to be, the more you have to offer others. The more you develop yourself, the more valuable you become to everyone around you. Yet the pressure to conform is enormous. And this is where most people give up. They start strong, make progress, begin to see changes, but then the criticism comes. The loneliness of the path becomes too much to bear. So they abandon their focus and spend the rest of their lives wondering what could have been. Don't let this be your story. When you push through this resistance, you discover a strength you never knew you had. You uncover a version of yourself that's been waiting beneath the surface. But focusing on yourself isn't just about resisting external pressure. It's also about overcoming internal sabotage. Your own mind will whisper doubts when you're making progress. It will remind you of every past failure when you're on the verge of a breakthrough. These thoughts come disguised as wisdom. They present themselves as realistic assessments, as protective measures, but they're not wisdom, they're fear wearing a mask. They're not protection, they're prison bars disguised as safety nets. The question you must ask yourself is this: are you going to let the loudest voice in your head be the one trying to keep you small? Because the voice that tells you to give up is not you. It's the accumulation of every doubt, every limitation that others have placed on you throughout your life. But there's another voice, quieter perhaps, but infinitely more powerful. It's the voice that knows what you're capable of. It sees your potential even when you can't. And that voice is waiting for you to focus on it, to nurture it, to let it grow stronger than all the doubts combined. Now here's what happens when you truly commit to focusing on yourself. Everything changes. Not overnight, not dramatically, but slowly. Surely, surely, like the dawn breaking over a mountain peak. You begin to move differently through the world. You carry yourself with a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you're exactly where you need to be, doing exactly what you need to do. You stop seeking validation from others because you've learned to validate yourself. You stop comparing your progress to others because you understand that your journey is uniquely yours. You stop making excuses because you've discovered the power of taking responsibility. And somewhere along this path, you realize that winning isn't about beating anyone else. It's about becoming the fullest expression of who you were meant to be. There's a profound moment that comes to everyone who stays committed to this path. It's the moment when you realize that the person you were searching for, the person you thought you needed to become, was inside you all along. You weren't broken and in need of fixing. You weren't lacking and in need of adding something external. You were already whole, already complete, already equipped with everything necessary for your victory. You just needed to focus long enough to uncover it. But here's the beautiful paradox of this journey. The more you focus on yourself, the more you're able to give to others. The more you develop your own gifts, the more gifts you have to share. The more you love yourself, the more love you have to offer the world, because you can't give what you don't have, and you can't have what you've never taken the time to cultivate. So the question remains, will you focus on yourself until you win? Will you stay committed to your own development even when the path gets lonely? Will you trust your own voice even when the world is shouting its opinions? Will you bet on yourself even when others refuse to? The choice is yours. It always has been. Every morning when you wake up, every moment when you have to decide where to direct your attention, every time you have to choose between your path and someone else's expectations, the choice is yours. Focus on you until you win. Not because the world needs another successful person, but because the world needs the unique gift that only you can offer. And you can only offer that gift when you've taken the time to unwrap it, to understand it, to develop it, to love it enough to share it. Your time is now, your focus is everything. Your victory is waiting.